Increase and rise of anxiety has significantly increased across the country. What do you think or believe is the cause to it?
Well, that's such a good question. I think, anxiety as a concept has become quite prominent, right? Because we're in an age where we're so interconnected, where we're able to share information much more freely. And because of that, lots more conversations keep happening, which is great, right? Because we share that information, we're able to connect with one another, and we're able to action then things from that independently. I think in terms of what's leading to the rise, one is we have more information available to us, so it's more front and center in our awareness. But we're in a very fast-paced world nowadays, and I think nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore, but COVID was a time for reflection for a lot of people and thinking about what was going on in their lives because we weren't as busy in our lives. So it gave a great opportunity to sit and reflect around what was going on. So I think we drew a lot of attention to it in that time. But post then, there's been lots and lots of changes in the world, which leaves a lot of uncertainty for people. And us as a species, we don't enjoy uncertainty. Right? Uncertainty does lead to anxiety. Anxiety has a huge biological or evolutionary response, right? It's born out of fear, and it is our brain's attempt to help us and save us, and can lead to great problem solving, right? So if we go back to a long time ago when we were still in that stage of hunter-gatherer society, right? If we were out hunting, but we felt this tingle up the back of our neck and, the hairs on the back of your neck are sticking up, perhaps there's a bigger predator out there than you, right? And so that kicks us into that fight and flight response. Right? Problem solving in that scenario is get out of there as quickly as you can or deal with what the threat is. But in today's society, we're usually the biggest, baddest thing there, right? We are top of the food chain, if you ask some people, which means we don't have to worry about getting eaten. A saber-toothed tiger, for example, right? Quite extreme. We don't have to worry about it. But it does pop up, and we have general worry, and then we have anxiety disorders. And I think it's important to differentiate between the two because they're not the same. Everybody has worries. Everybody has generalized anxiety as well. What differentiates that from disorder, though, is two different things.
So correct me if I'm hearing you correctly. We all have anxiety at just different levels or different worries per se.
Yes.
So if I have a rush of anxiety come on, it's because I perceive a threat to be around me. Yes. Whether that be, well, obviously it's coming from self, so it's a threat that I perceive to be dangerous to self.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess a good example might be we're sitting here, we're having a conversation, right? But imagine instead of us having a conversation, you were giving a presentation to 100,000 people. Congratulations.
Yes.
And in the weeks leading up to that presentation, it would be normal for you to be anxious, right? Worried that I might forget some of what I want to share with people, or it's on a new stage. I haven't presented on that one before, so I'm going to be unfamiliar with the equipment. So it'd be normal to have some worries around that. The problem solving that comes from that, though, is that you would perhaps practice your topics some more. You might ask the event coordinator, can I get a walkthrough on the stage and familiarize myself with that equipment? So again, problem solving and coming out to an endpoint. And so across time leading up to your presentation then, that anxiety is decreasing. Of course, you're going to get another rush of anxiety as you head out onto the stage. What a normal cycle is, though, is as you're going through your presentation and you're becoming comfortable, because I done this speech before, your anxiety is decreasing. And then you get off the stage, and in the hours after that, it should completely subside. Persistent or problematic anxiety would mean that you either didn't engage in those problem-solving strategies, so I didn't reach out to the coordinator and see if I could test out the equipment, but also as you're coming off the stage, you're thinking about that experience for days and weeks. And then depending on how you manage that situation, depends on how that will impact you in the future, right? If worst case scenario, maybe you dropped your pointer cards in the middle of your speech, and so your mind went a bit blank, but you took a few deep breaths, composed yourself, and continued on with your presentation, right? In a healthy cycle of worry and anxiety, you would take that as a learning experience. Okay, next time I need to number my cards. It's easy to get them back together quickly, right? I might have a handy joke up my sleeve to ease the tension as I'm picking up and reshuffling my cards. A problematic cycle would be I'm never speaking in public again, right? I completely avoid the thing that gave me the anxiety or the upset.
So is anxiety then, if it's I don't want to say self-induced because it's obviously coming from self, but it's just a behavior that's been picked up or continues on. If I don't correct it, then what does it look like for my line of path? Is it going down to a path of now I have full-blown panic attacks? Is it an thing where I just deal with the anxiety when it comes on? Or is it just a continuous cycle of ebbs and flows of, yes, it comes on, I can acknowledge it, but get on with my day?
Yeah. The answer is in how we deal with the problem solving, right? So if we continue on with the analogy we've got, one way to manage that anxiety response is to completely avoid public speaking again in the future, right? You're not going to get anxious again in that regard because I'm never putting myself in the situation where I speak in public and the potentiality of that happening occur again, right? So the anxiety is dealt with in that regard. But to answer your question, how's that going to impact me? Well, if your income relies on you publicly speaking, you're cutting off a potential income avenue stream if you don't find a way to manage and address the anxiety, right? So then that comes down to, well, what are my coping strategies? How do I know I'm probably going to get anxious the next time, and that's okay, right? My body's telling me something went wrong last time. Listen to me. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to save you.
Like a protection mechanism.
Exactly. And that's a wonderful thing to have. But it's okay for us to say, thank you, right? Thank you for letting me know that this is unsafe for me, but I can manage this. And these are the tools or the strategies that I have in place to help me with that. So that might look like, some of those grounding type things. I said if you dropped your notes, right, you might take some grounding, deep, diaphragmatic breathing to allow my body to re-regulate itself. Because you have to remember when we're anxious, our body is in a heightened emotional state, right? So its problem-solving capacity is only what's in the here and now. How do I save myself? How do I protect myself in the here and now? It's not thinking about if I don't finish this speech, I'm not going to be able to continue getting speeches or I'm not going to get paid. It's thinking, how do I save myself right now?
If I'm sitting at home and I'm like, oh, that could be me. I know what that feels like. Well, I know that experience. What would the sensation be like in the body?
It's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it because it can feel different for different people. And I think what's confusing about it is how we experience anxiety is mediated by how in tune we are with ourselves, right? When you Google really quickly anxiety symptoms, right, we'll see things like sweating all of a sudden, right? If you've ever spoken to friends or family about it or close peers, things like my palms suddenly get sweaty or I have like butterflies or feel really sick or nauseous in my stomach. My throat might suddenly get dry. People report muscle tension, right? And these things all make sense, right? We're sweating because our heart rate is increasing. So we might notice our heart rate's increasing. Our muscles might feel tense because we're tensing them in preparation to run away. Our heart rate is increasing, preparing our body to deal with this imminent threat in front of us. But it can be challenging to pick up on those things in some regards, because feeling icky in my tummy, right, can also be I'm about to throw up. So, am I unwell, right? Feeling icky in my tummy is sometimes also ascribed to butterflies and feelings of love and enjoyment, right? So across emotions, we have very similar descriptors for them. If you're not in touch or in tune with your emotions or your bodily state, how can we accurately pick out what that is? And that can happen for two reasons, right? I'm not taking the time to think about what's happening and the space to think about what's happening within my body, or we can have difficulties with our interoception, which is our body and brain ability to monitor and know what's going on within my body.
Interesting. What would be the difference then between a standard, let's say, anxiety rush or inducement and then a panic attack?
Yeah. So the difference between generalized worry and anxiety, and then I guess you've also asked about a panic attack as well, which is build up of anxiety. Let's go with the difference between general worry and anxiety or an anxiety disorder. Firstly, is that it's pervasive, right? It's not isolated to 1 to 2 instances. It's continual over time.
Around the same situation?
Or similar type situations, right?
Okay.
So again, if it was the public speaking that we were talking about, you may start to feel anxious even speaking in a small room of 10 people, right? So it's not always going to be public speaking for 100,000 people,
Yeah,
right? But similar type scenarios, right? The duration of the anxiety, right? If it's no longer contained to the event and I'm feeling it hours and days and weeks later, that's not typical. We shouldn't be in that heightened state for that long. And the level of distress, right? I think the reason I used public speaking as an exemplar is I think most of us, when we think about the idea of getting on stage and speaking to people, feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? Makes sense. You're one person, bright lights, you're the center of attention. It kicks off our prey response, feeling like we're prey, right? That's why I use that as an example.
Yeah.
We can all relate to it, even if it goes back as far as, primary school presentations.
Of course, yes.
So across time, we would want that to abate or get less. And when it's a persistent heading into an anxiety disorder, it's not going away, it's getting worse. So you might experience public speaking, get a little bit of a tingle before I first get on stage, and I'd rate that level of uncomfortability of maybe a 3.
Yeah.
Right? For myself, maybe I'm around a 5 or a 6. It takes me a little bit longer to get into it. For somebody else that has an anxiety disorder, that might be off the charts. A 10, this is the worst feeling for me, right? So the level of distress it causes a person is a big indicator. Heading into panic attack mode, that is where we're starting to get that shallowness in our breathing. Those earlier symptoms that I was talking along happens as well, and we get this deep rumination of thoughts that are extremely negative. There's no positivity in them because it's all the awful things that could potentially happen, and we ruminate and we circulate on them, and that kicks us into a panic attack.
How do I get out of it? If I'm in that place of a panic attack, how do I pull myself out of it?
The first time anybody experiences a panic attack, it's hard. You almost can't. You kind of got to ride the wave of that emotion, right? I think it's in our reflection afterwards that's
in
important.
hindsight.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, if we're in that heightened distressed state, we can't think through and problem solve rationally because our access to the thinking part of our brain isn't there. It's offline essentially. So it's in the aftermath. It's thinking back and reflecting on it, like you said. What were the triggers? What kicked this off for me, right? Identifying what they were, being honest with yourself around what they were. It doesn't matter what the trigger was, right? But unless we know what the trigger is, we can't effectively problem solve for it, okay?
So if like we try to lie to ourselves about it, that doesn't really help anybody because you're not identifying the actual cause of something.
Exactly.
Even if it may seem silly or minute to us, the reason for it is important.
Yes, exactly. And the reason will differ from person to person, right? But like you said, if we're not addressing it, unique as it is to us, whether it seems silly to somebody else, right, it's not going to be effective if we don't address what it was for us, right? And it can be anything, right? It can be a sensory trigger in your environment. It can be a physiological response, right? You get nauseous preparing for a presentation. So over the last 3 presentations, you haven't eaten the night before or the morning of because you want to eliminate the chance that you might throw up. Well, now your body's running on very little energy, and we don't do well in stress states when we don't have energy.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So sometimes the coping things that we put in place to try and mitigate these worst case scenarios actually make it worse.
Interesting. Okay. Like a form of coping mechanism that we might have had for it.
Yes.
What would be an example of that?
Sleep would be a great one, particularly for neurodivergent people, right? I know myself, if I'm worried or anxious about something, I have a tendency to not sleep as much as I should, over-preparing.
Okay, yeah.
And I call it over-preparing because there is only so much that you can remember or that we can teach our brain before we're starting to head into territory where you're not getting enough sleep, you're not taking care of your body. So if I'm sacrificing my sleep to try and feel more prepared, I'm heading into the event on a lack of sleep. Again, our base biological needs are really important. So I'm setting myself up to have increased stress heading into the event because my poor brain hasn't had the sleep it requires.
You just mentioned neurodivergent.
Yes.
How does that differ for somebody who's having has anxiety to somebody who's not neurodivergent?
Experiencing anxiety, neurodivergent or neurotypical, the experience of it in itself is the same. I think the key differentiator is, I talked about interoception before. We do know from research that interoception is often a difficulty that neurodivergent people have, particularly autistic people. So if it's harder for me to be in tune with my body's signals, I may be attributing what's happening in a scenario to something else other than anxiety, which makes it difficult for me to address that because I'm not picking up on my body signals that something is wrong early on enough to be able to manage it.
Would that be the same as somebody with ADHD?
Yes. Yes, ADHDers can have difficulties with interoception.
So would somebody with ADHD have a hard time with, like, ADHDers already have a hard time with completing tasks. So if I'm now not completing tasks, would that increase my likelihood of anxiety around that?
Yes, and potentially some of that, those negative rumination thoughts that we were talking about, adding in some confirmation to those as well, right? Those thoughts of you always do this, you always leave this to the last moment. why aren't you better prepared? Why'd you leave it to the last minute again, right? So that can add in to the anxiety that they're having as well. And I think, when we're talking about coping strategies and management for that, that's why we need to look at our own self, right? What that trigger is for me, right? Because if I'm not managing my trigger and keeping myself in mind, then I'm going to put in place coping strategies that don't benefit me.
Like affect you in a negative way.
Yes.
Yeah. So would that be the same line as like procrastination? If I'm procrastinating on a task or procrastinating, say doom scrolling is a big one for people. Yeah. That can be looked at as a form of I'm just procrastinating until I need that last little time crunch to get it done. Would that be correct in saying that?
Is that form of procrastination the same as anxiety?
Yeah, or like a coping mechanism, to avoid the feeling of anxiety. So if I am in a state where I can feel this emotion coming on, I don't know what it is. So I pick up my phone and I'm doom scrolling to try and avoid the feeling or sensation that I have. Would that be classed as a coping mechanism?
Oh, that's a very tricky one. So to answer that, it's important to understand that ADHD is an interest-based nervous system, right? And are highly motivated by stress. It's not helpful for our brains, right? But our brains seem to rely on that stress response to be able to bypass that procrastination state. So ADHD, as I've worked with in the past, and I know I deal with this myself, is that we know that we're prone to doing those things. So it's more around putting in place strategies to not engage with that, right? If I know I'm going to procrastinate and my favorite form of procrastination is scrolling through TikTok, right? Making sure my phone's not accessible to me, right? Finding something else to engage with. So that, again, why coping strategy unique to yourself is important to address.
You mentioned earlier that we have access to more information and it being shared around the place, social media being one of the largest places. If that is contributing to our levels of anxiety, how can we try and navigate it in a better way that looks after ourselves so that we don't continuously peak the anxiety?
Yeah. It's such a hard navigation. So I think first and foremost, let's call it out for what it is, right? With being more interconnected, right? It's a double-edged sword. It allows us access to communities that we may not have been able to access, right, before social media, right? It allows me to stay in contact with my family that lives overseas. It allows me to engage with community groups that I may not have access to in my town, my state, or my country. It's highly beneficial in that regard. But there is that negative flip side of in that things that cause us anxiety or distress, they're right there at our fingertips all the time. And so we can't say the solution is just kick ourselves off social media, right? Like just shut all of your social media accounts, right? Because then we're losing that connectedness, right? And that our social connectiveness is really important in terms of maintaining our self-care as a coping strategy, right? So then it becomes more around limiting and knowing the things that produce anxiety for me. Again, knowing my triggers and monitoring our use of that, reducing our use of that. I do think one of the challenging things is the way the algorithms are set up is the more I engage with this content, the more the algorithm is going to show me that. And again, double-edged sword can be a good thing and a bad thing, But that means just putting in place limits for ourselves and having healthy boundaries, right? I know that if I engage with X content for too much, it makes me very anxious. So I'm going to engage with it maybe once a week, right? And the rest of the time, I'm going to have a boundary that I won't engage with that because that helps me take care of myself.
Outside of that, how how does self-care kind of work in with anxiety?
Yeah. I think self-care's gotten a bit of a bad rap lately. So self-care at its core is taking care of ourselves. And somewhere along the line, self-care became this idea that, or a lot of myths, I guess, were created, or lost the thought of the word, untruths, right? Particularly where women are concerned. And part of that is because of the societal constructs we live within. So, for example, a lot of women, particularly women that have families, conceptualize self-care as being innately selfish, right? Women are caregivers. We're meant to give to people. We're not meant to take. And so this idea of spending time on self, right, became this really negative idea. It's not. How can I take care of or give myself to somebody if my own needs are not met? When we talk about having our needs met in terms of self-care, management of then anxiety, right, it's looking at things like our physical care. Right? Nobody likes to hear that they need to take care of their nutrition and their exercise. But if I'm not engaging in healthy eating, if I'm not taking care of my body in the physical sense and I'm not taking care of my sleep, I am more susceptible to chronic illness. I am more susceptible to stress. And both of those things don't allow our body to deal well with anxiety or distress. So we do need those three things in place. We also need things like taking care of our emotional needs, right? That can be through social connection. So the importance of maintaining those social groups. It can be things through developing healthy coping strategies for managing anxiety. Right? Things like progressive muscle relaxation, diaphragmatic breathing. They're not sexy to talk about, I know that, but they are so important because the central tenet of those types of coping strategies is helping our body exit that fight and flight, freeze state and come back down to baseline. Because when we come back down to baseline, when we are well regulated, that's when we can engage in the healthy coping strategies, the healthy reflection, and then actively problem solve. The last one I'd say is sensory self-care, right? Because sometimes the trigger is sensory-based. And we're talking a little bit about neurodivergent people, right? Sometimes what feels like anxiety is actually sensory overwhelm, right? So autistic people particularly, one of our diagnostic criteria is that we can have hyper or hypo responsivity to sensory input. So you have to imagine if my response to sensory input is higher than the average person's, my body is going to be more likely to engage in a threat response or perceive some of that sensory input as a threat than a non-autistic person, right? So that looking back at your trigger, maybe I wasn't worried about all the people in the audience. Maybe the light above me was too hot, right? And I was so uncomfortable in my body. What happens when we're too hot? We start sweating, right? So looking critically at what the surroundings were and then putting things in place.
It's very interesting to look at it from like multiple different perspectives and how it might show up effectively or ineffectively for different people. If I'm sitting at home and I'm thinking to myself, I've never even thought of the idea that I have anxiety, right? I just know that I get this weird feeling in my chest and it just is what it is. How would I start to be able to manage it if I'm looking at it from a very bottom line of maybe I start with breath work?
How would we start to manage it from a, like, this is the first time I've thought about it?
Thought, like, I've never thought of myself as an anxious person, but I'm hearing some of the things that you're talking about and I'm like, oh, I could see how that could be me, right? Oh, I do that. Or, I just know that I have this weird sensation in my body.
Yeah.
I know the first time that I started to identify a feeling, I couldn't tell you what it was in my body, but I could logically tell you. So there's, I believe, two types of people out there, right? The people who logically can tell you what it should feel like. And then the people who are like, I don't know what this is in my body because I can't identify it, but something's there.
That's not right.
And it's not right, right? So if I can't tell you what it is, how do I try and navigate that feeling, whatever it is in my body?
First of all, there's not a right or a wrong way, right? Because again, we're talking about what works for the individual. But I think firstly, it's identifying what that is. And if it's only a logical explanation or I don't know how to describe it, but it's an ick here or an ick here, that's a great place to start.
And when you say here, in case somebody's listening and not watching,
Sorry.
We're talking about like where within the body. So is it in the chest? Is it in the stomach? Is it on one side of the body and not the other? I was going to say, is it running down one of my arms? But we don't want that because you could be having a stroke or something. So it's obviously just one identifying where it is, could be in the body.
Yeah.
Please continue.
It's okay. Good point of clarification.
Yeah.
Identifying where that is happening for you.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And then thinking about the places or the situations where you have noticed that. And to start with, you might go, well, this is what I feel, but I'm not sure when I'm feeling it. That's okay. That's a great first step. You've identified what it is.
Yes, okay.
And now the next time you go out, reflect on that experience. Did that crop up there for me? What was happening there? What was going on? Like, think about it like you're your own detective in your life, right? If I was to follow myself around with a camera for a day, what things might I have observed about myself, right? And keeping a track of them. If you are somebody that feels like you'd want to talk to somebody else about that, then reaching out to a counselor, a psychologist, or a therapist. But there are things you can start doing yourself at home because, like she said, there's lots of things available to us online. Right, so looking into things like diaphragmatic breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, there is an abundance of freely available YouTube videos talking people through progressive muscle relaxation, grounding strategies, diaphragmatic breathing. And if the first one you try doesn't work for you, that's okay, right? Like I said, different people experience different things. I know for myself, I really struggle to listen to any of guided meditations, right? Because a lot of guided meditations are about capturing your thoughts and recognizing them. For myself as a neurodivergent, some of my thoughts are coming and going so quickly, I spend more time thinking about the thought than I do about accepting that thought and releasing that thought. So it feels like an impossible strategy for me. But I personally really enjoy progressive muscle relaxation because it gives me something to do whilst I'm slowing down my breathing and becoming more in touch with my body. For those of you
Sorry, I'll just jump in there quickly just to make sure everyone's understanding. When you say progressive muscle techniques,
yes,
can that be like a form of somatic?
Yeah. So progressive muscle relaxation is essentially a guided assistance. So you can do it yourself. I just like the guided ones more, of gradually drawing attention to tensing and then releasing individual muscles. So they typically start at your toes and work their way back up to your head.
In a meditative stance, if you will?
Yeah, so some people do them sitting. I've done them with school groups before, with students at their desks, students choosing to lay down on the floor. You could do it standing if you really wanted to, although I find often the deeper our breathing goes, we tend to get a bit sleepy, so maybe not standing up. But there are lots of ways to trial and manage that. So for me, in my busy brain, focusing on the aspects of my muscles allows me to stay within the exercise to completion, right? But it is those slower breathing states that brings our body and our brain back down to baseline, and that's what we need.
So realistically, our parents were probably right when they said, 1, it's the phone, and 2, you just need to breathe. So,
but if only it were that simple, right? Because I think that's one of the other big misconceptions about self-care is it's just easy, it's simple, you just do it, right? I think sometimes we're prone to Mondayism. Is what I call it. Like, I really want to start tackling these problems. So on Monday, I'm going to start going back to the gym and I'm going to start eating healthily. I'm going to go to bed every night at 8 p.m. and get up at 7 a.m. And I'm going to make sure I look at a different coping strategy and see how that works for me and journal that and reflect on that every day. That is too much for any person to engage with. And we unintentionally set ourselves up for failure.
That's kind of like the New Year, New Me movement, right? It's I'm going to start January 1st or I'm going to start Monday or Sunday, whatever the date it is. I'm going to fix all these problems and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
I think it's in Atomic Habits when he talks about compounding habits, whether it be like walking in a podcast or walking on the treadmill, watching TV, whatever it is. But the idea of us trying to do too much at once or change too much is essentially setting ourselves up, like you said, to fail because we become so overwhelmed in trying to do it all. In the world of health and wellness or fitness, you don't change everything at once on the client for obvious reasons. It's let's change one thing at a time, and it's usually let's get you moving more. Let's now then change your diet. Now we can go to the next thing. So it's always periodically. So if you're trying to relate anything therapy related or mind, body, and soul, call it, always think it back to your fitness standpoint or even your business standpoint. You don't go in and change everything. It's one at a time.
Yeah. And it can be really tempting to do everything all at once. Again, I've been there and I've had to learn the hard way. You cannot do it all at once.
What is that like on a psychological level? Like what is happening in the brain or in the person for it to be like, this is what I want to do. And then we go like, no.
I think it creates a really negative feedback loop when that happens, right? Because we really want the change. And if we jump into it, in that all or nothing mindset and it doesn't work, then it's like, well, I tried and it failed and I'm not doing that again.
Is it kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where we're like, I'm going to do it all? And because it's like a pendulum swing of the all of nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump in and do everything. And then it's like, well, I told you it wasn't going to work anyway.
Yes. Absolutely. It's about finding balance. So there is a branch of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. I really like it because it talks about this idea that we can be in two states at once, like a set of scales, right? I can want to improve my anxiety and my coping strategies available to me and not be in the space to change all 6 things, right?
Interesting. Okay, yep. Right. So like there can be 2 truths at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so a healthy balance out of the 2 of those is which is my priority to address, right? So if I'm going into a clinic and I have a diagnosed fear of dogs, perhaps, and I also experience agoraphobia to spiders, right? We might sit down and look at, well, which one actually impacts me day to day the most, right? If I have a dog in my home, but now I have a fear of dogs, that's impacting me the most day to day, right? Because now maybe I'm thinking about getting rid of my dog because I'm so scared of my dog. That's the one we work with first. Spiders can wait. It doesn't mean that I'm not trying to work with that anxiety or I'm not trying to solve that problem. It means I'm tackling one thing at a time. When we tackle one problem at a time, we have a greater chance of success. And then we have a positive feedback loop. I did this was a success, and now I can tackle the next thing. We're going to have setbacks, right? It's not always going to be a linear improvement. But then it's looking at what the setback was. And how do we adjust for that then?
How would I adjust for a setback?
Depends on what the setback is, firstly. So again, identifying what the thing is and what the outcome of that was. But adjusting for a setback means identifying it, what it was, and accepting it for what it was. It's okay. It happened. What are my learnings from that? And how do I adjust for that? We're human. I wish I could remember who the saying's from, but to human is to error, right? We are going to make mistakes along the way. We're not going to deal with all situations with beauty, poise, and grace, although we may want to. And that's okay. But how do we learn from that? How do we, what did we forget one of our coping strategies? That's okay. Maybe having them on little cards that are accessible in my wallet. I've done those little keychain cards for people to remember what the coping strategy is as I'm getting anxious. That's okay. If I need a coping card to help me remember what my coping strategy is until it's embedded in my brain and I can naturally bring it up myself, that's fine. That's a tool, and that's okay to have.
It's something like you're creating a habit. So if you can't remember, like you said, the coping strategy for it, it's helping you get it right as many times as you need in order to cement it, for it to become an automatic habit for you to continue on.
Absolutely. So for example, for myself for today, I know if I can't get movement frequently when I'm talking or thinking about things that are important, I have a tendency to lose my train of thought. And then the anxiety kicks in because it's like, oh my gosh, you should know this. This is your bread and butter and what you talk about 50% of the time at work. Right? You should know this. But the trigger for that was an unmet sensory need. So I navigate that by making sure I have access to a fidget tool or a sensory tool that feels nice to me, my little ones. Lovely little orange worm for those of you that aren't here. But it allows me to meet my sensory needs, meet that movement need, and then therefore stay present in this conversation with you. And I'm avoiding the anxiety in a healthy way because my brain's staying on track. Therefore, I'm not going to drop out of my thoughts and the anxiety won't kick in.
If I'm sitting at home thinking about your little fidget thing, I'm like, oh, I click on my pen a lot. I play with things. Would that be equivalent of?
Yes. Yeah. So it can be things like clicking on your pen, pulling apart your pen. Some people like to doodle in the margins and draw little flowers or spaceships to help them think or to help them stay on track with things. It can be some people that I've worked with in the past really like having false nails because it allows them something to flick and fidget with. Or if you're one of those people that likes getting the jewels on top of their nails, that's something I can rub my fingers over. For a lot of people, jewelry can be a way of accessing that as well. So,
like if you were to wear rings and be able to spin them on your fingers.
Yeah, and like those fidget type rings are becoming very popular now, right? But even just looping your bracelet around or twisting your ring on your finger, you don't have to buy one that's advertised as a fidget or sensory ring. We can access them in many ways. Your necklace, you could be somebody that likes to play along with it as well.
As you're listing some of these things, I'm like, oh, I can see myself doing that. I do that. Okay, so self-care playing into it. How should my self-care look if I'm trying to minimize anxiety?
First and foremost, and feels like banging on a drum, right, is those physiological needs, right? Our sleep, our diet, and our nutrition are core to all functioning as a human being, right? We only have one body. More importantly, we only have one brain. Science is not at a point yet where it can do anything to regenerate, regrow our brains, right?
Whereas we can have we could be amputated and have an arm added, a leg added.
Yes, we can have prosthetics.
Yes.
We can't do that with our brain, right? So if we don't care for our brain, we are unable to care for ourselves adequately. And caring for our brain means getting the sleep that our brain needs, right? Because I know some people that do well on 4 hours of sleep. Other people need 8 hours. Right? The World Health Organization research shows the average person needs about 8 hours. So let's use that as kind of a base standpoint. So getting good sleep, making sure I'm eating meals that sustain my body, right? And then the last one, forgotten what it was. Did I talk about sleep?
You did. So our base standpoint being nutrition and exercise and sleep.
Exercise was the one I forgot.
Okay, there we go.
Probably because it's the one I dislike the most. Exercise is important as well, right? Exercise doesn't have to be going to the gym every day, right? It can be in my lunch break or walking up and down the stairs in the fire escape of the building, right? It can be swimming in the backyard with my children every afternoon for 45 minutes, right? Anything that gets our bodies moving. But we need that. We need it regularly. So once we've met those core or base biological needs, then it looks like what feels good and rewarding for me and myself, right? So engaging with our interests, right? Engaging in routines or activities that feel pleasurable for us, right? So for some people, that might be at home at the end of the day, putting on a face mask and with a lavender candle and listening to my favorite podcast, right? That's a form of self-care, right? For other people, they would say, well, Heather, I feel most content when I'm exercising. So haven't I ticked that box already? And yes, in some ways you have, but also you also need to engage in some other form of self-fulfillment. That can be drawing, right? Baking, gardening. There's all sorts of interests that we have. And then for anybody that thinks they're potentially neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, people who are bipolar, they all fall into the neurodivergency umbrella. Also looking at our sensory care and our mental health care, right? Our mental health care, particularly if you're a person that already has a depressive disorder, for example, or you have another diagnosis like bipolar, for example, schizophrenia, taking care of your mental health is as crucial as those 3 pillars that we already spoke about, right? Our sleep, our diet, and our exercise. Because if you don't take care of those, again, they are core functions for your brain. You need to take care of those. And sometimes care for that might be going and talking to a health professional, might be going and talking to my GP and getting started on medication for a bit. Right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but medication can be a crucial pathway to lowering our baseline enough that we are able to address those problems. Our anxious distress is so high and so frequent that we are unable to come to baseline. Medication can help with that and allow us the opportunity to start engaging in that problem solving.
Interesting. If I'm looking at the medication side of things, what would that, or how would I go about it?
Yeah. It differs from state to state, country to country. So wherever you are, definitely do a quick Google of. But I would say for most people, the place starts talking to your general practitioner, right? So your doctor, around how you're feeling. And that's where that early identification of, well, this is kind of what it feels like. And if you know you have a hard time describing those things to your doctor, where you know you're prone to forgetting those things when you're under pressure, take a list. There's nothing wrong with taking a list with you to your doctor to help you stay on track or to help you describe what that is. If there's a handy YouTube that describes exactly what is going on for you and you resonate strongly with that, there's nothing wrong with taking that to your clinician and going, I don't know how to describe it, but this wonderful person, that's exactly what it is, right? So talking to them as your first point, saying, I think I would like to explore a medication. I think this is what's happening for me. And then going from there.
What would be the downsides to wanting to pursue medication?
I think the primary downside, and again, this depends where you're living, right, is medications in some industries can limit whether you're able to engage with them. I would say probably less for anxiety medications, but certainly other forms of medications may inhibit your ability to continue performing in a job. But that's probably not not a reason to consider not doing it, because if your distress is so high that you can't function, right, being in your workplace is already challenging for you potentially. So again, a good conversation to have with your GP. There's nothing wrong with having the conversation and having the information available to you, right? Because it's with having the information that we make the informed choice. I'd say one of the other considerations is medication isn't a one-size-fits-all, right? A medication that might work for you may not be efficient for me. And medication isn't a one-stop shop, right? I don't take the medication that's going to solve all the problem. Right? I still need to start engaging in healthy coping strategies and managing my self-care, because the medication is helping bring you to baseline so that we can engage in those strategies. So I wouldn't consider medication to be a long-term solution, although for some people it's definitely a requirement to stay on medication for a long time. Very individualized again.
So realistically, it all depends on your circumstance as to how you need to approach it, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because our circumstance does dictate our ability to engage in something, right? If where I am is in a period of, I'm in the middle of a recession, for example, right? Going and talking to a counselor may not be an option because
economically feasible. Yeah,
it's not feasible. But also, I think anywhere in the world at the moment, getting into a health professional is very hard. Right?
Yeah.
There are really long wait times,
especially in America.
Yep, here in Australia as well. So, making access to the information that we do have available to us can be a good stopgap while we're waiting for those kinds of services. And talking about it with our friends or our family or our loved ones that we trust, because it's when we don't talk about these things that, they become a bit more insidious in that we feel isolated and we feel alone. So talking to people we trust about it as well can help.
Heather, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on today. I hope everybody listening has at least taken the smallest takeaway from it, even if it means placing some decent boundaries around your phone to limit the increase of anxiety. And for the women out there, please increase your self-care. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll have you again soon.
Thank you for having me.